Alisha
Hey,
Arora. Tom Hitchcock here. How are you?
good. How are you?
It's Friday.
Yes, absolutely.
So, no, I'm all good. Thank you. So, listen, I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Obviously, I know quite a bit about you already. Okay.
Mhm.
But it's very little about what I know. Okay. And it's more a case of whoever stumbles across your video in the future, okay, gets a good idea of who you actually are, what you're up to, where you're going. Okay, obviously, there's a little cheeky logo there of adaptive approach, and I reckon that's going to take up the bulk of the conversation. But before we get into the company, tell us a bit about who you are, where you're from.
Yeah, so my name's Alisha. Background is physiotherapist. So been working in the industry, started off in the hospitals, and then stepped into the NDIS world pretty early on, and then shifted over into a bit of rehab consulting as a physio, and then merged all the worlds together and then made a business out of it. So here we are today.
Okay, all right. So let's go back a couple of steps then. So you're a physio by trade initially. Is that something that you always wanted to do?
Yeah, I think I've always wanted to end up in the health field. I think attracting towards helping people was my number one goal, and trying to understand how to do it was the question, because there's so many professions out there, and trying to actually figure which one I would fit in the best. I think with my skills and my personality, physio really attracted me. You get to spend a lot of time with the patient, debrief, educate, and actually empower them to change their life. So I found that physio, I mean, there's a lot of other careers that are faster moving than physio, and you don't get to spend much time with the patients themselves. So physio really attracted me from that end. But physio also, and many people wouldn't know this, it actually has a lot of areas or arms to the profession itself. So you could be a physio for horses, or you could be a dog physio, you could be geriatrics physio. There's so many avenues that you can go along to. So that really attracted me, and I didn't have to sit in one field the whole time and my whole career. So I like jumping around. I like to know a little bit about everything, and that really attracted me towards physio.
Okay, all right. I didn't know that you could be a physio of horses and
Yeah,
what have you as well. I
yeah, not
really like
many
frogs. I
people
wonder
do.
if I could be a frog.
Yeah, not many people do. And I think you only realize that once you start studying, and you understand the potential that there is, and you do a bit of placement here and there, you get a lot of exposure. But the general public's perception towards physio is a private practice physio who does sports or out on the footy field, and they'll run on and do it. So there's actually quite a lot to physio, and there's a lot to unpack, which makes it an amazing field to sit in.
Yeah, okay, all right. And if it wasn't to be physio, so obviously your criteria was I want to help people, it needs to be health, and it needs to align to my skill set, personality. What was the close second?
The close second, I still say to this day that I would be a vet if I wasn't a physio. So funny. And I actually say if I went back to uni, I think I would become a vet, and try that avenue as well. So that, yeah, I think it's quite similar to physio in terms of the profession speaking and understanding, just a whole different clinical skill set of doing it. So it's not people who can respond to you. You're speaking to obviously the owners, but then you're understanding the animal.
Okay, so if I'm reading between the lines here, I'm starting to see a picture where you're trying to tell us without saying us that you like animals more than humans.
Yeah, I'm going to say that straight out. Animals win over humans for sure. Yeah, they don't tend to talk back or say anything, and they're unconditional love. So that's definitely a winner.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Then, so okay, so someone's thinking going through the same pathway. They're looking to get into physio or massaging horses or whatever the case may be. Okay, what would you say would be the right attributes which would make them the right fit for that type of role?
I think you have to be very flexible in physio. You can't just come in that one mindset and say, I'm going to be sports physio, and you actually end up being a sports physio. I know a lot of people tend to come into the physio world, saying, I'm going to be a sports physio, and they turn out to be working in the hospital. So I think you've got to be flexible in your approach to understand that there's different avenues. You have to be very personable, being able to be empathetic and connect. Like I said, majority of your time is sitting with clientele and understanding their issues and being sensitive in the manner that you respond, because sometimes things can come off as they should be, and that can actually make a really negative experience and can change their whole perception towards physio. So you have to be a bit more empathetic, but also understanding and responsible that you actually have the whole profession sometimes sitting on your shoulders. If you say something negatively and it affects them, it really changes their perception. So those are the main skills that I would think. And obviously hardworking. The course is not an easy course to get through, so you've got to make sure that you're determined to be able to see it out through the end. A lot of people started physio and then they dropped out into whole different other professions because it just wasn't for them. So if you really do want to do it and you do see yourself at the end being a physio, you have to put in that time and that effort and work to get there. I think that would be probably the top 3 skills.
Okay, all right. And that's that. I've seen that many times in different areas of study, besides trying to be an architect, trying to be this, that, and the other, scientist, or whatever it may be. And they've fallen off and they go a different route at the end. And it's really knowing what traits will set you up for success so you can enjoy what you do, which means you're going to follow through. Because no one wants to see someone do some study with the investment and time and effort halfway and not conclude it. So that's it's going to be really good information for those individuals that are thinking about that.
Absolutely.
Okay, and one thing I do notice, you can't help but your physio puns. I know you talk about your back-to-back meetings, and to be a physio, you must be flexible. Well, you know, you don't want to be.
It's inbuilt, Tom. They teach you in the degree how to use a pun, so you just got to use them throughout your day.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. So fast forward. You've done your physio. You went into hospital. That's where you went first. Was that by design or by choice?
A strong desire. I always thought I was going to sit in public hospitals for the rest of my career because I loved it. I did heaps of placements there. There's also a wide variety in the hospitals itself. So you can be in the MSK, you can be in emergency, you can be in juries, rehab. There's lots of avenues. You don't get bored sitting in a public hospital. There's lots of trauma sometimes that comes through that keeps it very complex. So there's always things to see and learn from. There's this program called allocation. So that's where you get a spot with New South Wales public hospitals. So that's quite a competitive process to get into. So that's how I started wanting to get into public hospitals. So I wanted to do my allocation year. So I landed my allocation year, and that was a split between Auburn Hospital and Westmead Hospital. And I rotated around there, and I learned a whole bunch of things and had the best time, had amazing people surrounding me, lots of great mentors in that space. But I think as time went on, I learned a lot of clinical things, but you also slowly get burnt out when COVID came around and the hospital systems were very overloaded. Physios were jumping out into community settings and sometimes taking over support workers who were off with COVID. You're going to a group home. So there's lots of other things that happened during that time, but also learnt a lot during that time as well. So yeah, spent time there and thought it was time for a bit of a change after that.
Okay, so I think you're displaying your flexibility again, but I think the good thing about something like a hospital or other arenas, it's a good place to spend a bit of time for anybody really, so you can actually see the extremity of human life.
Mm-hmm.
All the things that we hear about on the news or on what have you, you can see firsthand and really calibrate your mindset so that we're not. So we're ready for these eventualities as and when they cross our paths,
Absolutely. I think you learn a whole bunch in the hospital. You don't ever just see the one case over and over again. And you've got, physios with years and years of experience that you can leverage off and really understand different clinical ways to approach it. Lots and lots of support there, and you get to learn different types of, way to class for different injuries. There's so much potential if you want to absorb it. When you're in that setting, you can definitely learn a lot there.
Okay, all right. So we're done with the hospital. Time for a change. What was the next step for you?
Yep. So I went off to become a rehab consultant. So I wanted something a little bit different from the hospital. Still in the clinical space of physio though. So I moved on to the private side where I worked with a lot of insurances who dealt with CTP claims, and they would hand off the referrals to us. The main aim was pretty much to undergo the rehab process with them. So that may not be in the form of physical manual therapy, but in terms of your clinical reasoning, you would try to clinically reason them to get back into either it be work or return to any activities that they were doing in their daily lives. Normally they would have treating clinicians already on board. Your job was to liaise with everyone to make sure that we are achieving those goals and outcomes. And obviously you have that clinical knowledge as a physio already, which makes it a lot easier to be able to facilitate that rehab process and get them to those goals. So learned a whole bunch of skills there in terms of communication, especially with people who, sometimes didn't want to go back to a particular occupation or wanted to go down different avenues, to be able to understand how to maneuver conversations, but also sometimes they face quite a lot of trauma. You see a lot of PTSD. So it's really understanding how do you provide empathy to them, but also try to do your job and get the outcomes that would be desirable for that patient. So there was a lot to understand and unpack in that role, which I think has made me a better person. And I think being in a private setting, I also understood a lot more about business and how it operates compared to the public system. And it was nice to compare those two sides and understand the differences.
So I think that's the definition of actually being holistic, is to actually go full circle and see both sides of the fence in this case, but also see how to communicate what the differences are and to understand that. So one of the things I've observed, especially in NDIS, and those that don't know what that is, it's National Disability Insurance Scheme here in Australia. There's similar schemes worldwide, okay? But especially in that space is, I'm losing my thread. What I was going to say. Look at that. Oh, it's been a long week, hasn't it?
It's nearly the weekend.
Oh, blimey. I was making, I completely lost my thread entirely there. Look at that. And it's recording, so there's no way out of that one. That's a shame. Okay. All right. But let's fast forward. I have completely lost my thread, but it will come back. It happened right at the end. So I'll ask you that question at that point.
Fine.
Okay. So you then decided to set up. Actually, I know what I was going to say. Mm-hmm. Okay. So then people go through that similar-ish progression to yourself. What I've noticed in the NDIS is a lot of people then go and set up their own business, because there seems to be a progression into private practice. Is instead of working with someone else, they end up going into business. There seems to be a bit of a trend at the moment. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it really depends. So I pretty much started with NDIS when I was in the hospital system. So I did contracting after hours, all the weekend roles that no one wanted to touch. I sort of put them on, put my hands up for them. And I learnt a lot throughout that process. I think people, if they have experience, I can definitely understand why they would open up their own business. But unfortunately, sometimes it's a bit of copy and paste in the sector, that people just open up businesses, but they don't really bring anything different to the party. So I think that's something important to understand, that you need a bit of point of difference, or you need to be able to change the sector in some way if you are, opening up a business and making that commitment. So it's really important to make sure that you have a mission to bring in, and a goal that you want to achieve. So there's nothing wrong in opening up a business. I mean, everyone's welcome to do it, but I think it would be beneficial with a purpose behind it.
Okay. All right. So what a lovely segue. So here we are, got adaptive approach, a new business. You've taken that leap of faith. Tell us a bit about what your USP is. Okay. So your point of difference, which you alluded to there, but also what your purpose, where it is, where you're going.
Yep. So I think the biggest thing with adaptive approach is wanting to be adaptive within the setting, right? You want to be flexible. You want to understand that the market is forever changing. I think the NDIS is a great example right now of how the market changes so much. Our mission and our unique selling point is that I felt like there wasn't enough communication. So obviously I've worked in that sector for a while now. I'm in and out. I can see allied health and how it works, but understanding that there wasn't much communication between all the external stakeholders. You sort of do your therapy, and then at the end, when plan review and everything's due for the end of the year, everyone starts chit-chatting then, and sometimes goals haven't been addressed, or they could have been done a little bit more effectively. or the participant wanted something different. It's always just having that open communication. So I saw that and I really wanted to change that with this business and how we run things. So I wanted to make sure that when I open this business, we are offering something that is unique. The reason it is unique is that reports are quite expensive, as you know, in the NDIS space. Everything is billable, and it takes time to do quality reports and services. But I've been willing to, cop the costs of that on this company. And I want to offer free monthly reports to, our external stakeholders to make sure that we are achieving those goals and having that open communication through and through, and then making sure our clinicians are adaptable in terms of the feedback that we're getting and then implementing those into the sessions. It's a lot more effective the way rehab is provided then, or any clinician provides services from that point onwards, if you have that open, honest, transparent communication with everyone. And, it's been a really, really great response through the market so far. A lot of people are loving it. They're very appreciative. And I think it doesn't touch people's budgets. So they're a lot more happy to get that open and frequent communication. And that's just something that we've wanted to do from day dot.
Yep. Okay. Oh, I love that. I love that there's an element of problem solving with the identity of the business, but also it's enhanced on the delivery for the participants in this case.
That's it. Yeah,
Good.
I think it's really important to be able to do that, because in the end, they are people who really want therapy and they want it done the right way. And if we can implement small measures to make sure that we are delivering the best quality of service that we can, it's the least we can do.
Okay. All right. And so for anybody that's outside of the NDIS and what have you is listening to this, what are the services you offer in layman's terms?
Yeah. So we obviously, I'm a physiotherapist, started off with just being a physio company and then have slowly expanded. So we have physio, we have speech therapy, we have exercise physiology, occupational therapy, and dietetics. I don't think I've missed anything there.
Okay. All right. Nice one. Okay. And what's the future hold for the business? What's your big plan?
Yeah, big question marks always. I think the biggest thing that I've learned in business is to be super open and take things as they come. So, if you get an opportunity, presents with an opportunity, I'm always going to explore that avenue. So it could be in terms of having a more stable location. It could be expanding the range of allied health that we provide. Could be entering different domains. All of it's a work in progress, slowly but surely.
Okay. All right. And before we wrap up then, so if someone wants to make contact with you, it could be they want to talk to you about being a physio, they want to talk to you about your services, they want to talk to you about your journey from being a practitioner into run your own business. How can they contact you?
Absolutely. So, I think mobile is the easiest way if you wanted to reach out to me. So it's 0412 178 184, or you can just flick me an email at hello@aarehab.com.au.
Too easy. Okay. All right. And I'll put you on the spot with just one last thing as we wrap this up.
Mm-hmm.
Let's give us a little antidote to think of. We talked about a few things, they all can join. If you was to give one little bit of advice out to whoever's listening to this, what would that be?
It's always a good one. In terms of being, I think I would like to ask people to stay open, because if you close yourself off and you stay in your little bubble and you don't really look outside, I think that really harms you than it does good. I think it's worth always opening your eyes, having those discussions, because it may take you down a different route like it's done with me. So if I stayed in my narrow little bubble of the public hospital, I'd be a very, very different person at the moment, compared to having conversations and evolving yourself along the pathway.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's wonderful. So thanks again for your time. I do appreciate it. Hopefully you'll have floods of people reaching out to make contact with you, but without disrupting your work, of course.
Would love to have discussions. That's absolutely fine.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you very much, Alisha.
Thanks, Tom.